this podcast has been a form of comfort and even therapy for me. I don't know if people sense that at all. And so I called Zach on here so that we could reflect a little bit on the big picture arc of where we started back in, let's call it beginning of 2018. When do you put as the start, Zach, of our adventure together running for president?
So I took a number of months. I actually tried to like find the exact dates on this because I've been writing a book on the kind of this journey, which is fun. I haven't actually.
Zach has been writing a book, and I have read excerpts from it, and it's awesome. Evelyn has read both parts of his book and then parts of my book that's coming out later this year. And Evelyn prefers Zach's book. I just want everyone to know that's
mine's more about like the journey, right? And like the roller coaster. Yours is more about like solving problems and where we go and things like that.
So you can see why Evelyn prefers Zach's book. So Zach, tell us about the book, the journey, and when did you say the journey began?
So that's actually the number one question I get, Andrew, is like, how'd you meet Andrew? So I knew Andrew from my days at UBS. I was helping rich people give money to charity, and they loved Andrew. They loved Venture for America. Andrew was a rock star in the social entrepreneurship space. Now that is a tiny space to play in, but we would have him come to our like client events all the time. I'd seen him speak on panels and was always very great, fantastic at them. And you could like his humor would come through, that kind of thing.
Andrew Yang, panel star
for sure. I'll never actually. This is funny.
Yes,
this is so funny. Do you remember this? Okay, I want to set this up. So this is not in the book, but you did a panel we used to do these basically billionaire kids events. Like if you're super wealthy and you bring your kids, like how do you inherit like $100 million types of events? And we'd always do something on like a philanthropy day. And you did a panel with a guy named Adam Braun. And if you wanted to draw like the perfect like white boy stud, it's probably Adam Braun. He's like,
he was quite studly.
Good looking, like went to an Ivy League educated, rich, like started this nonprofit, and he tells this story of this organization at the time called Pencils of Promise. And he tells this story about how he goes to Africa and he asks a kid, like, what do you want most in the world? And he said a pencil. And it's like this heartbreaking story. And he's telling this in the context of saying, like, my whole life, my parents had told me like bronze are special. Like, and he knew it in his heart when it happened. And there's not like a dry eye in the room. Like everybody's like, oh my God, Adam. And then so the moderator's like, okay, Andrew, your turn. And he's just like, Andrew, you go. Yeah, my parents told me the exact opposite, actually. They're like, Yang, you're not special. They're like, go to law school, do something traditional, like work for a law firm, like you're boring. And he's like, even my nonprofit, like, it was like, oh, it's Teach for America for entrepreneurs. Let's call it Venture for America. Like nothing about this was special in my head. And the room just lost it. That was my first like debate experience theoretically of Andrew Yang without knowing it. That was probably 2016, something like that, 2015.
And I have to say, coming to those events was always a treat because the environments were always super nice and the food was good. And like, like sometimes there was like, that there was a celebrity or entertainer.
Oh yeah, one of the kids would get a table somewhere.
Like,
yeah, they were fun.
Now, so Zach and I knew each other through that for a while. So it's true when someone says like, how did you meet Andrew? Like you would have to backtrack to maybe 2014, 2015? I
met you. And so I asked you to be, my roommate actually worked for Venture America, Joe Guy. And he was like, you have to meet Andrew. Joe Guy is a great guy. Joe Guy, Mr. Guy. But he was like, you got to meet Andrew. You guys are two forces of nature. Actually, we tell direct words. And I asked Andrew to be on my board of my nonprofit, and Andrew's like, I love this idea. Sure, how can I help? I'll be on your board. Great. It was a classic Andrew, like, yeah, if my name can be helpful, which it was, to get more people and more legitimacy. Anyway, so I had heard, long story short, I had heard your shtick like hundreds of times. And I went to this dinner, and Andrew, it was April, I think, of 2017 is like the timing. There.
Wow.
It's somewhere in like late spring.
No, it's somewhere in that mid 2017 range.
Yes.
Yeah, that'd be right.
Before the summer, I thought it was summer. It's not. And I went to this like Jeffersonian round table dinner. I used to go to all the time. It was like very pretentious, like 15 people meant to be on a topic. And this one was on the future of work. And I was curious about this topic, and I go and I got the list of the roster, and I'm like, oh, there's gonna be all these cool people here. I'm excited. And I go to this like restaurant, I think it's in the West Village or somewhere downtown, like private room. And who parachutes in? Andrew Yang parachutes in. And I remember being pissed. I mean, like, damn it, I've heard your spiel 100,000 times where you're like, hey, we got all the smart minds in the world doing 6 things in 6 places. We need to get them out of like the New Yorks and San Franciscos in the world and get them to Detroit and Cleveland. And it's a great pitch, but I was hoping to learn something. And Yang comes in and just drops this bomb, like takes over the room and drops what I eventually called like the automation bomb, which was like a working version of the war on normal people. It's like why Donald Trump got elected. Here are all the jobs in the United States. Half of them are going away. And then in the middle, in this room, after this, he's got the whole room like captivated. And he's like, and I'm running for president of the United States. And it was like, you could hear a pin drop. It was like, president of the country, like of America, and how we got connected. Afterwards, I was like, well, Andrew, I just paid off his student loans. I was like looking to leave UBS. And I was like, hey, Andrew, I'll help. And you're like, great, you can come manage the campaign, something like that.
Well, because I knew you were very, very strong. You were a builder, you were a doer. I mentally thought to myself, I need to make sure that Zach is into this because he elevates our chances of impact and success dramatically, immeasurably. And so let's call this like spring 2017. I mentally was like super pumped about it. And then I resolved then to try and update you periodically and keep you updated. So the main thing I was working on at that point was the manuscript for the book. And so I would just send you pages of the book.
So we got coffee and, wrong book. This is your book. We got coffee. This is one of the rare times you get to go behind you and pull a book. And I get coffee with Andrew probably like 2 weeks later, and he sits across and he slides me this book, Raising the Floor by Andy Stern. He's like, first of all, read that. And then this is what sold me on universal basic income. And the second thing I asked you a whole bunch of questions. I don't even remember this. I was like, do you have any skeletons in the closet? You're like, no, I'm boring. It was right around, like, this is the height of Me Too. It was like just starting. I was like, please, I'm not doing this. You're getting Me Too.
Well,
like, no.
What's funny too is like, Zach knew people I'd worked with. We could check and be like, hey, does Andrew have any of that action going on? And they were like, no.
I did a lot of research to that. And then I was like, well, what's your plan? I can help with money. I'll always hustle to fundraise, but like, what's the plan of money and the path here? And you pulled up the New York Times. This was so prescient, was stuck with me. You pulled up the New York Times. I think it was the New York Times. I might have watched the Post, but I think it was New York Times infographic on the Republican primary and how much money they raised and how they performed. And you said...
It was WAPO, yeah.
Yeah, it was WAPO. And you said, you're like, what do you think the Democratic primary field is going to look like? And I had not given this that much thought. I was like, I guess probably pretty crowded, and I can't really think of a front runner. You're like, yeah, it's going to look like the Republicans. There's going to be a ton of people running. And so I just need a lane to get my message out and be considered serious. And then he's like, now everybody thinks you got to raise billions of dollars in politics. But it's like, the reality is Republicans do that because they can get super PAC money. But I've looked at what these clowns, I think I don't know the exact word, but some of these guys on the Republican side had raised. And it was like Huckabee, Carly Fiorina, a couple names, Ben Carson. There were a couple names that were
Christie,
that were big names that had only raised like $1 to $3 million, if I recall. And you're like, I can raise that. And like, we can do, like, that is a feasible number to be a serious contender.
And I remember, I don't know if I said this number to you, but I think I said this to myself. I was like, I can raise at least 20 million. And 20 million would have put me in like fairly serious contender category. We ended up raising 40. But I, in my mind's eye, I don't know if I ever said this to you out loud, Zach, but I was like, like I had an internal goal. I was like, we can raise 20 mil for like
such a ridiculous goal.
A presidential camp. I mean, it turns out I was a little bit cocky and unrealistic because then when we got into it, like, it was actually very difficult to raise.
The first year was rough.
Yeah. Like raise 4 mil, much less like 20 mil, though we did eventually get to 40 with a bunch of escape velocity. And thank you, everyone listening to this. I have a feeling you probably contributed to that 40 million. So thank you. Super, super grateful. But yeah, I showed you that infographic. I was like, look, this Democratic primary is going to be a zoo. There are going to be over a dozen candidates. Like, we just need to raise, X million dollars to be able to fund an operation and compete.
Yep. I'll fast forward a little bit, but when we finally got in office, so this is probably May, I think, either April or May of 2018. Yeah. We were like the first year was really hard to raise money, and you were there, and you were that said like, Zach.
I got to say, Zach, I never told you this, but this was like a big thing for me, and you could actually get into this maybe. So the timeline is you and I do this thing in spring 2017. I'm like sending you stuff, being like, hey man, it's great. I filed the paperwork for the presidential campaign in November 2017, which obviously no one notices or cares.
No one cares. You got an article in the Times. Not yet. Sorry.
But I got the article in the Times February 2018. So there was a 4-month period or so when I was building and coming up with policies and like graphics and like all of this kind of stuff, email addresses. And then during this time, I did not tell you this. I was like, there is I thought in my mind's eye, I was like, there's like a 20 to 30% chance that Zach realizes that joining me in this is very, very foolhardy.
Fundamentally ridiculous.
So there was like a part of me that was like, oh shit, like if Zach realizes this, like that's going to be very difficult for me because I kind of have Zach penciled in as the operator campaign manager. And so every day between when we had launched and before you left UBS full-fledged and joined the team, I had this like, no shit, I really gotta make sure that Zach actually sees the path and the light.
I appreciate that.
And so what was your last day of getting paid by UBS? Because this was like the period when I was like, is Zach really going to leave his sweet banking job to join our madcap presidential campaign? So when was that date?
So I didn't end up leaving. My first day on the campaign, I think was March 2018, either March 1 or like middle of March. I have the date in the book.
And what's the name of your book?
The book is called Long Shot right now. There's a subtitle I can't remember.
And when's it coming out? We'll do another pod when
we'll dive in the book.
Well, you can give you the full on author treatment.
Yeah.
But everyone now, like their appetite is being whetted. They're like, I'm totally going to read Long Shot.
It's meant to be funny. It's meant to be all the stuff. It's like the book I think the Yang Gang wants to read about this. I hope that's my goal. There's a lot of stories like Andrew.
It is. That's what everyone said.
Someone else is telling
it. My book is not really the book the Yang Gang wants to read, but yours is, and that's what everyone said.
I think it's funny from a political lens too. We'll see. So I left UBS. Yeah, I was like, is this real or is it not? What sold me, guys, I read the manuscript of the book and I jumped out of my bed in one of the chapters. I remember calling my brother and I was like, I got to work for him. I said, I don't know why. It just feels the right thing. It feels like called to do it. And then it was one of the things like if I didn't do it, I'd regret it the rest of my life. And so like my first day, let's say it's like March 1st, 2018, we were at Andrew's mom's apartment before we got our first office. And there was 3 other people plus you. One guy, Muhan, was living there. But I remember showing up in like a suit and I didn't wear a tie because I thought that'd be too formal. But I wore like a suit and I was like all Wall Street ready. And like I got in there like 8:30. I was like, man, like maybe 8 o'clock. I don't remember what time it was, but it was early. It was like, like a morning. And Muhan wasn't even out of bed yet. And there was no one in this office. It was just no one in the apartment. And I was like, oh, this is going to be different, man. The apartment was full of boxes because that's where all the boxes from his book were being stored. Amazon boxes. I was like, man, okay, this is not, we're not in Kansas anymore.